The End of Oz, Chapter 11. There was no way to describe what it felt like to someone who'd grown up in a world where magic was normal, witches were real, and the Cowardly Lion ate people in front of you. But what I wasn't telling Madison was that when I first landed in Oz, I was happy to not be in Kansas anymore. Happy to have escaped the trailer and my mom. And Madison. Happy to be needed by the Order and not to be chosen for something for the first time in my life. Oz had made me stronger, had given me the magic and friends and love. Oz had given me something to fight for. But I didn't say any of that to Madison, who was missing her baby, who was one crazy, creepy thing away from having a meltdown. "There's nothing you could have done," I said. "I mean, I know that doesn't help, but you didn't do anything wrong." "I dropped him," she said again, and then she looked away. "I don't want to talk about this anymore." "Did you ever visit Sky Island, Amy?" Lang cut into our conversation, as if she hadn't been paying attention, but I knew she'd been listening. She was giving Madison something else to think about. For the first time, I almost felt grateful for her. "No," I said. "Amy learned magic in the caves," Knox said. "After you left, it got too dangerous to take people there. Maybe when all of it is over, Amy, you can see it." "What's Sky Island?" Madison asked. So as we talked, Lang told us about the place where she'd learned magic from Mombi, the old, abandoned tourist resort, a floating island clear as glass that drifted through the rainbow-colored clouds that changed colors to the beat of your heart, the river made of lemonade, the clear sky the way it was always sunny and never too hot. After all the time we'd spent underground, even just the thought of blue sky seemed so impossibly, unreachably beautiful. But the way Lang talked about the swirling, colorful mists that moved across the island was so vivid, I could picture myself there. Next to me, Madison sighed softly. "I wouldn't mind seeing that," she said. "It's hard here, I know," Knox said, "but there are beautiful things too. That's what we're fighting for." I could see Lang's back stiffen, and I knew Knox had said something wrong. "Is it?" she said, her voice low and hard. "Is that what the Order does, Knox? You'd think you would have at least changed the speech after all these years." "Lanadel," he said, and then sighed and shrugged. "Believe what you want," he said. "For now, we all want the same thing, to take care of Dorothy once and for all." "For now," Lang agreed, in that same rough voice. All visions of Sky Island were pushed aside by the harsh intrusion of reality, because I knew that Lang was only protecting us to protect herself, and as soon as she found a way to leave us behind, she would. I had to find a way to convince her to fight with us, or we were screwed. Luckily, we didn't have to walk much further before the tunnel ended in a solid iron door. Lang placed one palm on the metal and murmured something that sounded similar to the chant her boatman had sung. At first, nothing happened. Then the door swung open with a creaking groan. "Need to oil the hinges," Lang remarked. "Haven't had to use this place in a while." On the other side of the door, the tunnel broadened into a room of which branched out several hallways. One led to a little kitchen, another to a bathroom where I saw happily there was a tub. Others led to a small sleeping chamber, the main room with a rough wooden table and a few comfortable-looking chairs scattered here and there. The whole place was lit by glowing veins of crystals in the walls. It was small and modest, but extremely cozy. Lang showed us the pantry, where shelves practically groaned under the weight of jars and barrels of preserved food. "You could last a long time in here," Knox said. "That's the point," she said coldly. "Well, I'm passing out now," Madison announced, and Lang softened. "You can take any of these rooms," she said. "Mine's farther down the hallway. Help yourself to anything you want to eat or drink. I need to figure out what to do with you. It's almost morning. It won't take long for the Gnome King to realize he doesn't know where I am, and put two and two together." She glanced involuntarily at the silver bracelet around her wrist. She saw me follow her look. "It tells him where I am," she said quietly. "But the wards around this place are too strong for it. He'll figure out soon enough that I've gone somewhere he can't find me." I still don't completely trust her, but I realized how much Lang was risking to help us with this much. She could just as easily have thrown us out of her palace, or turned us over to the Gnome King. She didn't care about helping us. She cared about hurting Dorothy, but for whatever reason, she was keeping us safe, no matter how she talked to us. Somewhere, some part of her was on our side, enough to keep us alive anyway, even though it put her in terrible danger. For the first time in a while, I started to actually feel hopeful. Maybe there was a way out of Ev for us. Maybe we could defeat Dorothy after all, and when we did, I was getting out of this underground hell as quickly as I could. Lang might be used to the unending, unrelenting darkness, but I ached for open air and sunlight, the smell of flowers and growing things, anything but stone cold and blackness and dark cold water full of unseen, terrifying creatures. Lang brushed past us and was gone, her footsteps swallowed up by the stone as she walked down the hall. "Okay then, good night, I guess," Madison said. Her voice sounded small and sad, but I knew there was nothing I could say or do to make it better. I'd check in with her in the morning, but it wasn't like I could reunite her with her kid or send her back to Kansas with a snap of my fingers. She disappeared into one of the bedrooms, closing the door behind her with an unmistakably firm snick. She didn't want to talk, and I wasn't going to push her. "I was going to look for some tea or something," I said. I was exhausted but too jittery to sleep. I had suddenly realized that I was alone with Knox for the first time in a very long time, and I was nervous. Despite all the drama with the witches trying to separate us and pit us against each other, and then dying and not dying, Knox and I were getting closer. The truth was, I didn't have much, any experience with guys aside from fending off my mom's creepy ex-boyfriends with their super inappropriate interest in her teenage daughter. When it came to someone like Knox, I still had no idea what I was doing. "Tea sounds good," he says. I poked through Lang's pantry until I found something that looked vaguely tea-like. A jar of small, dried gray-brown twigs that smelled like green tea my mom drank by the bucketful when she got clean, and hoped I wasn't accidentally brewing up a potion that would turn us into frogs or beetles or something even worse. While I heated water on the stove, Knox threw together some odd-looking green batter and poured it into the pan. "Who are you and what did you do with Knox?" I joked. He smiled. Mombi never stopped being a witch, even when I was a little kid. She kept odd hours and sometimes gone all night, but whenever she came home, she would make these. He plated 2 green pancakes and handed one to me. "Her Mombi way of taking care of you," I quipped, as I took the tea to the table. Knox sat next to me on the wooden bench, so close our thighs touched, and my heart skipped a beat. "I should tell you about Melindra," he said quietly, and my thoughts screeched to a halt. "Okay," I said neutrally. He licked his lips and pressed them together, staring off into space as though he couldn't figure out how to start. I took a deep breath. "You're in love with her?" I offered. He looked startled. "What? No, is that what you—" "No, Amy, that's not it at all. Lang was in love with her." I stared at him. "Wait, what?" "When Lang came to train with the Order, she had no one. Her family had been killed in one of Dorothy's early raids. This was a long time before you came, before we understood just how bad Dorothy was going to be. All we had were rumors at the point. We just knew we had to be prepared to fight if it came to that." He laughed softly, bitterly. "Which, as you know, it did. Anyway, Lonadel journeyed through the mountains alone on foot, starving, for weeks after her family was murdered, trying to find the Order based on stories she's heard that we existed. She almost died, but Gert found her. She started training with us. She was good, very good, actually, one of the better fighters I'd ever worked with, even though she had no training, no experience. She was driven. All she had left to keep her going was the idea of avenging her family. And then she got close to Melindra." He took a deep, ragged breath. I didn't say anything. The pain in his voice was awful. Without thinking, I put one hand on his knee and he took it, lacing his cool, dry fingers through my own. "You never met Melindra before she went through—" He cleared his throat and continued more strongly. "Before she went through the Scarecrow's workshop. She was the most gifted fighter I've ever seen, but it was something more than that. She had this warmth, this kindness, this generosity. Other people with her strength could have turned into a bully, but not her." "Melindra? Warm and kind? That didn't sound anything like the bitter, scarred warrior I knew, the half-tin, half-human girl the Scarecrow had turned into the Order's resident mean girl. But I might not have much kindness left in me either if I'd been through this torture. Lang, Lonadell, hadn't had much friendship in her life. I don't think, even before her family was killed, and Melindra took her under her wing. For Melindra, it was just the way she was, but for Lonadell, I couldn't see it then, but I think it was much, much more. And then Melindra... He stopped. His fingers were squeezing mine so tightly that my hand was losing sensation. I held my breath, not wanting him to stop. "This is the hard part," he said. This part where I made a mistake." I'd never heard him admit anything like this, that he could be wrong, that something he'd done for the Order was a bad decision. My heart ached for him, but at the same time I couldn't help feeling an admittedly selfish sense of relief. He wasn't in love with Melindra or Lang. I knew that should have been the least of my concerns, but my feeling about Knox didn't obey rational rules. Melindra didn't feel the same way about Lang, but she did feel that way about me, he said uncomfortably. I cared about her, of course. I think if I hadn't been so wrapped up in the Order, in trying to take care of all the trainees while keeping the witches happy, I might have been able to love her too. But it wasn't the right time. She wasn't the right person. I didn't have anything to give someone else then. I could have handled it better. We had an awful fight about it, and Lonadell overheard. The next day I sent Melindra to spy on the Scarecrow. She went because I told her. I could never return her feelings. Lonadell thought I'd sent her away because I couldn't stand what she'd said to me. That I didn't know how to think for myself. That I was just Gert and Mombi's puppet. "But you didn't?" I said. "I don't know, Amy," he said, looking me in the eyes. "That's what I'm telling you. I sent one of our best fighters into a situation she couldn't possibly survive. She knew it, I knew it, Lonadell certainly knew it, and I didn't know why. I told myself it was because we needed the information, but for all I know, Lang was right, and she's right to hate me for what I did. Gert and Mombi sent Lonadell to Ev to spy on the Gnome King right after Melindra left for the Emerald City. They worked up some kind of spell to get her across the deadly desert. She was supposed to send back reports but we never heard from her again. We all thought, she was dead. When we started hearing rumors about Princess Langwyatt or some crazy tyrant who worked for the Gnome King and who cut off her subjects' heads and wore them as her own, well, none of us even thought of connecting her to Lonadell." "Can we trust her?" "Lonadell?" He sighed, running his hands through his blue-black hair. "I don't know. Probably not. Although now that she knows Melindra is alive, she doesn't have the same reasons for revenge. But the road brought us here for a reason, and the road always does what it does for the good of Oz. It comes from Lorraine. Its magic is older than anything else in Oz except for the Great Clock. I think there's something much, much bigger going on here than just Dorothy and the Gnome King, and maybe that's ultimately what we had found out if we want to end all of this." "I wonder why the Gnome King rescued Dorothy," I said thoughtfully. "He doesn't seem like the kind of guy who needed much help in the magic department." "The Gnome King has always wanted to rule Oz," Knox said. I groaned and rubbed my eyes with the heels of my palms. 3 worlds, 2 pairs of shoes, 16 villains. It's too much. But I don't know if there's anything we can do about that right now. We're stuck in here with this crazy mobster or whatever she is. In all these years, she's never taken him down, and she seems awfully comfortable here." "She's not crazy," Knox said gently. "She's in pain, more pain than you can imagine." I nodded. Lorraine had said the same thing. "She has nothing," he continued. "She lost everything she loves, everything she cares about. For better, for worse, our paths are tied to hers now, and I think she's right about taking care of Dorothy for good. I know how hard it was for you back in the Emerald City to be faced with that choice, and I don't want you to be the one to have to do it. But as long as Dorothy's alive, we're in danger. There's no other way." "But I don't understand why Lonadell hates you so much. You were just following orders." "No," I said. "I wasn't. I was the one who decided to send Melindra to the Scarecrow. That's the thing Lonadell will never forgive me for. Gert and Mombi sent her to Ev, and she came here thinking that Melindra was dead, and that I'd good as killed her. And if Melindra had died, it would have been my fault. Whatever happened to her was my fault. We would still... You can't blame yourself for what the Scarecrow did, Knox," I said urgently. You can't carry this thing around for the rest of your life, letting it eat you up inside. You told me every time I had to do something awful that we were at war. We're fighting so that other people don't have to make the kinds of decisions we do. I understand that you think everything the Order does is your responsibility, but you can't blame yourself forever. You just can't. Melindra wouldn't have gone if she didn't think she could survive. Melindra wouldn't have gone if she thought I loved her, he said. My heart hurt so badly thinking of what Knox was putting himself through, all for something that was so much larger than anything he could control. For so long we'd all been Gert and Mombi and Glamora's pawns. He might have made a decision he regretted, but they were just as responsible. They had been calling the shots all along until now. They'd literally controlled him until the road had taken us out of Oz. They'd told him he and I could never be together. They controlled his entire life. And now he had to carry this burden, feeling like he deserved Lang's hatred all because of what he'd done trying to save the world. Knox, do you believe that I make my own decisions? Of course. I chose to join the Order. I chose to take the mission. I chose you. Melindra and Lang, they chose too. It's not on you. He opened his mouth to protest, but he closed it. And I choose to do this now. I kissed him with all the love and compassion I had in me, with everything inside me that told him I understood that there was nothing to forgive. I didn't need magic to tell him everything I wanted to know with that kiss, that I was hopelessly, helplessly, unconditionally in love with him, that I'd stick with him until the end, whatever that end looked like. And he kissed me back, hesitantly at first, and then with a hunger. I could feel through his mouth, his hands buried in my hair. It was a long time before we came up for air. Amy, he said hoarsely, but I put a finger across his lips. No talking, I said. I took his hand and pulled him up from the table and practically dragged him to one of Lang's open bedrooms. He kicked the door shut behind us and I shoved him backward onto the bed. Finally he smiled, grabbing my hands and pulling me down on top of him. We had made out before, but this felt different. When Knox's lips brushed my neck, I felt the kiss wash over me. I sat up, and my hands hesitated at the hem of my dress. And then I pulled it upward. I had taken off my dress 100 times without falling over, but this time I began to. Knox caught me and helped me off with the dress. When I emerged from underneath it, he threw it on the floor. We were both laughing until I placed my hand on his chest. He paused for a moment, running one calloused palm down the bare skin of my back. Are you okay? I rolled over to face him, covering my chest with one arm. I'm, really nervous, I said. I felt myself blushing, and then I blushed some more because I knew he could see me blushing. It's okay, he said with a gentle voice. We don't have to do this. We don't have to do anything at all. I can go. Do you want me to go? No. My voice came out as an urgent squeak. It's just that I've never done this before. The thing that, it seems like we're maybe about to do. Oh, he said. He blushed too. He sat up, and I thought I'd ruined everything. My heart sank. I've never done this, that before either. But Melindra... No, he explained, and then backpedaled. I mean, not that. No, we're just, I got it, I said quickly. I definitely did not need the gory details or the comparison. When I first met you and I saw you fight, I told you you had to change, that you had to learn to be the knife. But I was the one who needed to learn. I never thought about myself. I thought of the Order. But I was the knife. I was the fight. You taught me how to love. You taught me how to choose, and I choose you, always. My heart clenched at my chest. Knox and I fought back on the battlefield. We had kissed and touched before, but there was always a stopping point, a holding back. This was letting go. I felt almost more a part of my own skin, and at the same time more in the moment than I had ever been. Every touch and a kiss was a call and response of skin and feeling, but it wasn't like the movies. We still giggled a lot, and it was awkward and funny and a little weird, but also completely, totally perfect. It was nothing like I thought it would be, and everything that I ever thought it would be all at once. Afterward, I pillowed my head in his lean, muscular chest, and his sandalwood smell enveloped me like a cloud as the pounding of his heart slowed to a regular beat. He put an arm around me and burrowed into his chest. I love you, he said softly in my hair. I know, I said, yawning. and I fell into the deepest, most content sleep of my life.